Hey, we've been in the series, To Be or Not to Be. See, that's the question. We've been talking about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, the Beatitudes. Those aren't attitudes to have. Those are actually a description. Beatitude means blessing. Jesus is teaching his closest disciples what it is to be blessed. So here's the story. So Jesus has been ministering. He's been people are seeing miracles. People with disease, every kind of disease, they're bringing them to Jesus and he's healing them. Those that have demons, those that are oppressed and possessed by demons are being delivered. I mean, it was a powerful time. I'm sure it was probably an exceptionally wild time. His fame, it says he was becoming famous, and that from all over the region people were coming. And it says that Jesus sees all this and then does something. He goes to the mountain. I want to read you the scripture that we've been in, Matthew 5, 1 through 5. It says, seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain. And when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, and this is where we get the Beatitudes. Verse 3, blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. And blessed are the meek. This is our key text for today, for they shall inherit the earth. If you haven't caught up on the sermon series, or if you've been gone, I strongly suggest to you to go to our website, crosswalkcc.com. Go check out the previous sermons on video. You can also go to our YouTube channel. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth. I mean, that's a pretty awesome deal. We're going to talk about meekness today. To be or not to be meek, I mean, that's really what we're looking at. Jesus uses a word right before he says this. He talks about blessed are those who mourn, for they will be comforted. That word comfort, we understand this word better than we realize, because multiple times a day we are comforting ourselves, whether we're turning the air conditioner up or down, the heater on or off, we're putting on a blanket, in our car, we're adjusting our seat. All points of the day, we're truly experiencing some element of trying to comfort ourselves. Jesus says, if you're mournful, you'll be comforted. See, that word comfort, right before he's talking about meekness, is this idea of control. Comfort is a form of control in our lives. And so really, at the faith level, at the spiritual level, oftentimes our struggles are at this control level, this comfort level, what we feel comfortable with. It's a big part of our lives every day, but it bleeds over into the spiritual. Ultimately, our faith struggles reside in the aspect of who has control. Who has control of your life? You know, you would like to say, if you're a follower of Christ, oh, Christ has control of my life, but I'm telling you, there'll be a battle there. And so to be or not to be meek is the question that we're looking at. Me or God? Who's willing to take the reins, grab hold of the steering wheel, or hold the course? If you've ever tried to train a new driver in a car, someone who's never driven before is what I'm talking about. We're past that stage. Even though I ride with my kids, you know, from time to time, it can still be scary. But training them, you know, you find a parking lot, you find a back road, and you put them behind the wheel. And for those of you that have experienced this, you know what I mean. Those of you that haven't experienced, you're getting ready to have a whole new experience. It's going to be awesome. And so this matter of control or feeling out of control, I can tell you, I wasn't a good teacher. I was just too uptight. They would rather drive with Heather in that moment. But that is a great illustration of meekness. Meekness, power under control. Power under control. One of the lessons that people have told me over the years to illustrate meekness is, if you think of like a thoroughbred, or you think of a wild horse, a Mustang, and you break it, you put the harness on it, you saddle it, and that animal still has all the power it ever had, all the potential to do what it had always done, but now it's harnessed, it's under control. That was an illustration of meekness. Some of you have heard that. I want to tell you that what Jesus is talking about, this idea of meekness here, with a blessing of inheriting the earth, is is deeper than that. Because meekness truly doesn't just encompass the element of the power of the things that I can't control, and I give those to the Lord. In other words, I recognize myself in the series here, in the line of Scripture. I recognize that I'm poor in spirit. I'm so lacking the power that I need for this moment. Jesus says, you're blessed. I'm so mournful at the state of my condition of my life. It's so dark, it's so clouded. I realize that I can't do this without him. I'm blessed. But then he says meek, meaning this power under control. It's not just the things of, Lord, this is so far out of my element and so far out of my realm that God, I just give you lordship over that. No, it's also dealing with meekness, power under control in the aspect of those things I can do something about, those things I can influence, those things I still place him as Lord of my life, because truly his ways are different than ours, aren't they? And how he may respond to something may be different than mine in how I would respond to it, especially if I have the power in my mind to do something about it, to influence this. So meekness encompasses not just the things I'm powerless to do, and I give that to the Lord, but the things that I do have a power. I do have a potential that even in that, I'm harnessed to say, Lord, your way, your will be done. That's the idea of this meekness. It's a controlling element of our lives. So to be or not to be, here's the first note, to be or not to be controlled. To be or not to be controlled is an issue of self-control versus God control. Self-control versus God control. You know, when somebody is driving, we would say, when they're driving the car, we'd say they have complete control of the car. But that's actually not necessarily the fact, because the passenger could reach over at any time and grab the steering wheel and just move the steering wheel, right? Which would create a whole new moment in the whole situation. So sometimes when we say somebody has control, they may appear to have control, but they don't really have control. Who is controlling your life? Self-control versus God control. Meekness is the supreme humbling. It's the supreme humbling and submission to all controls in our life. That's the word that Jesus is using to his closest followers who have followed him up this mountain, and for him to speak to them. And what he's saying to them is just as applicable now as it was then. Lean in, church. That's sobering for us to submit, to humble ourselves to all control. I mean, that can be viewed from our mindset at times as defeating, as depleting of who I am. But the thing is when my definition, when I am identified by whose I am, that changes everything. That's sobering for us. And even though I can grab the wheel, I trust him because of the seat that he's in. You know, 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7, Peter is one of the disciples that probably knows better than anybody what it is to put his foot in his mouth, to epically fail, even spending time, one of the closest with Jesus. But he says this, 1 Peter 5, 6, and 7, in regards to letting the Lord control one's life. He says, God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties on him because he cares for you. So in this idea of control of our lives, there can't be any element of pride. You can't say, Lord, Jesus, I make you Lord of my life. Lord, you have the first say and the last say, and then get into a situation and go, okay, hang on, God, I don't know why you did it that way. I don't know why you're driving it down this road. I don't know why we're going that direction. I don't know why this turn happened. I don't know why. You can't do that. That's pride. When I relinquish all control to him, I make him Lord of my life, then I say, God, you have all control. The things I can't handle and even the things I think I can handle. You have all control, Lord. It's your way. You drive it. Take care of it, Lord. The issue of control is connected to pride, and to be meek is to set aside any pride and to look at God controlling all things in our lives. Not just the little things, not just the big things, but all things. So secondly, to be or not to be Contained is the second word I want to bring about on meekness. The containing, to be meek, to truly be meek, is to be contained in the will of the Lord. It's to be contained in His direction, to be contained in His course for your life. And it's a struggle of my ways versus mountain ways. My ways versus mountain ways. Again, Jesus saw the crowds. He saw all the miracles. He looks to the crowds and He goes to the mountain. He's got something He's got to tell. He's got something He's got to teach His disciples, because they're going to be the ones that are going to take this gospel to the world. And they've got to understand first what blessing is. And blessing is beyond circumstance. It's beyond how you feel. It's beyond what you see. Even if you're poor in spirit, He goes into the whole teaching. You're blessed. Even if you're mournful, you're blessed. And the meek are blessed. Those that have their power under control, they're blessed. There's an inheritance attached to this struggle of my ways and mountain ways. He takes His disciples to the mountain. I believe Jesus wants to take each and every one of us to the mountain, because sometimes some of the things that He has to say can't be said or taken in the frenzy of normal everyday life. I think that's important. People will say, I just don't know if it's important to spend time with God every day. I try to, but I'm telling you, you've got to go to the mountain with Him every day, because He's got something specific for you every day. And it's a reality that you recognize His power, but it's His presence that comes in that mountain time. And my ways are so different than mountain ways with Jesus. Your ways are so different than mountain ways with Jesus. To be contained is to be aware of the boundaries that hold me in His ways, that hold me in His ways and cause my life, my responses, my reactions to be dictated by His ways. See, we say things like, that's just how I've always done things. Jesus understands that. It's gotten me through. See, my response and my reaction like that, it commands attention and it commands the room, and therefore I've just always done this, and so Jesus knows this. Okay, careful that you're not operating more in your power than His power. That's not to say that maybe sometimes God uses you in a situation, but just make sure you're being meek about it. Power under control, which harnesses your power as well and puts His power in its proper place. Church, when we are meek, it means we're humble, we're patient before the Lord. Nobody likes to be patient. Nobody likes to wait. But He causes things to move when we're humble and we're patient. He causes things to change, to conform or be contained in His will as meekness is obeyed. The Apostle Paul gives us a picture of what this looks like. The world versus maybe the spiritual that's going on in our lives. The Apostle Paul writes Romans 12, 1 and 2. He says, I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual act of worship. He says in verse 2, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. See, my ways conform to the world. Your ways conform to the world. If we go with our ways, we're going to conform to the world. We're just going to come in it. But God's ways transform. God's ways are different than the world's ways. God's ways contain us in His path, in His will. My ways cause me to look to others' ways where Jesus, or where there is envy and strife. However, Jesus' ways produce an everlasting inheritance for me as I wait for Him. You got to wait for Him. His power. I mean, how many times our prayers are get ahead of God? Lord, we need you to show up. God, I need you to do something. And what we're really meaning is if you don't do something, I'm going to do something. Well, that's not meek. That gets you in trouble. You get ahead of God. We got to wait for Him. Those who wait for the Lord, King David, he writes, the psalmist, he writes in Psalms 37, 7 through 11. And really, Psalms 37, 11, Jesus is actually quoting in the Beatitudes about the meek. But the psalmist writes, Psalms 37, 7 through 11, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. Fret not yourself over the one who prospers in his way, over the man who carries out evil devices. Refrain from anger and forsake wrath. Fret not yourself, it tends only to evil. For the evildoers shall be cut off, but those who wait for the Lord shall inherit the land. In just a little while the wicked will be no more. Though you look carefully at his place, he will not be there. Verse 11, here it is, coinciding with what Jesus tells his disciples on the mount. But the meek shall inherit the land and delight themselves in abundant peace. The meek shall inherit the land. See, the meek let the Lord control and contain them through every trial and in every decision, because they know and trust the Lord at his word. There's no other way, church. Meekness allows for God to set us apart from the world, and in doing so, receive what only he can give. That's powerful. That's a pretty incredible deal. As Jesus, he takes his followers up to the mountain. He's got something very specific. They've got to get this. They've got to understand what blessing is. They got to understand that no matter what they go through, blessing is available to them because of who is with them. He was preparing them to be consecrated or set apart from the world and for his purpose, and he's positioning them to receive his power, not just in the moment, but for every moment of their lives. If you're taking notes, write this down. To be or not to be consecrated. That word consecrated just means set apart. To be or not to be consecrated is a battle. It's a battle, church, of self-righteousness versus God's righteousness. Self-righteousness versus God's righteousness. Look what Jesus teaches them leading up to meekness. He teaches them, blessed are the poor in spirit. Again, going back a couple weeks, the poor in spirit. It's when you are so low. It's when you realize like you are so far out of your league, like there is no way that you would ever be able to accomplish, ever be able to do, you would ever be able to have any effect in this situation or circumstance. When you realize that and you put Jesus at the helm of your life, oh, you're blessed. And then he goes into the mournful, when here's death and here's mournful. That word mournful is likened to looking at a casket of a dead loved one and realizing I can do absolutely nothing about the situation, the state of my being, the state of my life. I can do nothing about it. Jesus says, hey, it's at that point you're blessed. The mournful, they'll find comfort. The 23rd Psalm, the shepherd's with us. And though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I don't have to fear evil, for he's with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. So regardless of situations, I'm blessed. Regardless of what you go through, you have available to you blessing. And it's attached to this meekness, power under control. These all go together, and as a result, you get an inheritance. I like that deal. My grandpa years ago, he passed away when I was late teens, and but growing up, we'd go visit Grandma and Grandpa, and Grandpa would go, hey, come over here. I got a deal for you. And I loved Grandpa's deals. His deal would go something like this. Hey, how about I give you $20? And I go, I like that deal. and he goes, okay. And I go, but then as I got older, start doing math, thinking a little more abstract, I'd go, hey, Grandpa, I got another deal. He goes, okay, what's your other deal? I go, how about you give me another $20? And he goes, I don't like that deal. Sometimes God gives us a deal, and we go, this is too good to be true. Or we see it from the wrong lens. God's giving us a deal, and we want more. And we miss what God's truly offering. We say, God, just make me stronger, when in reality, we don't need him to make me stronger. We don't need him to make us wiser. We just need to lean into what's available to us through him. Yeah, that's when you're blessed. See, to be or not to be consecrated is a battle, self-righteousness, God's righteousness. In closing, to be or not to be content. To be or not to be content. Oh, wow. Contentment. perfect contentment? It's an attitude of self-rightness versus godly rightness. You know, if you're meek before the Lord, you honor God with the obedience of meekness, He will honor you with an inheritance. I mean, what a deal, church. What an opportunity to understand and find true contentment, but this attitude of self-rightness and godly rightness. To find that place of contentment through meekness is not natural for us. We think more power will give me meekness, will give me blessing. More of this, more of that will give me blessing. Now, more of this and more of that may not be a bad thing, but if I operate everything under the lordship of Christ, that's where blessing resides. To be blessed is to understand I have an inheritance waiting for me, a power of control to the point that I do not question the Lord in my situations or circumstance or His ways, where He's taking me, and live in such a trusted place that whatever happens, I'm blessed because I'm content. Wow, what a place to be, church. And can I tell you, that place is available to you and me. He had to take His disciples up to the mountain to tell them this, to get them to understand this, because it's very easy to look at everything going on, and as though as powerful and as good as it may be, it's easy to get our eyes on the miracles of God and miss the relationship that's available to us with God. So how's this accomplished? I mean, that's the big thing, is how's this accomplished in your everyday life, in my everyday life? How's this accomplished? Well, Jesus gives us the answer to that. A few chapters later in the book of Matthew, Jesus tells us in Matthew 11:29, He says, listen, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly, that means meek, in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. That's contentment. To take His yoke upon you, that yoke was placed on the ox, was placed on the animal, not to hurt the animal, not to just add extra weight to the animal, but to create a control for that animal, that its purpose would be at the guidance of the one who holds the reins, at the guidance of the one who understands the bigger purpose here. Jesus says, take my yoke upon you. Don't be controlled by anything else. Don't be controlled by the things that so easily control us. Our desires. Sometimes our desires are not godly. Our plans. Sometimes our plans are not godly. But if I take on His yoke, all of a sudden He steers me into the right place, into the right path, at the right time. And I understand, that there may be a power struggle. You know, sometimes I want to go left and Jesus is going, no, it's not time to turn yet. I want to go right. Sometimes, no, it's not time to turn. But Lord, I really believe, I really feel, I really think that, no, that's not meekness. Meekness says, Lord, your way. Take His yoke upon you. I mean, what does He say? He says, for I am gentle and lowly in heart. It's power under control. Oh, He could snap the reins. He can get you where, but that's not why He's saying that. He's saying this because I know the best way. And there's blessing with this. As a matter of fact, so much blessing, you're going to inherit the earth. So you're like, man, that's a lot. It's a lot of mowing. You inherit the earth. And you'll find rest for your souls, that contentment. Listen, the meek are blessed because they put everything at the feet of Jesus. Everything at the feet of Jesus. In being meek before the Lord. To just rehash through the notes again, controlled by God, contained in His ways, consecrated for works of righteousness, and content in our lives. What